Hi, I'm JJ Barnes, and this is Jonathan McKinney.
Hi.
I'm the author of the Lily Prospero series. He is the author of the Shieldmaid saga, and we are screenwriters who have a film in production right now. We are bringing you a series of writing advice so we can share the things that we have learned. Today we're going to be talking to you about when you're writing a book, what kind of ratio works best in the prose to dialogue. Because if your page or your chapter is too dialogue heavy, it will read like a script. You might not necessarily know who's spoken and much about the character. But if it is too prose heavy, you start not to know the characters, who they are relating to, their interactions. It can kind of boot you out because a lot of conversation is where you root yourselves or you ground yourselves in who those characters are, in how they speak to each other. So I know when we first started out, my first book, Lily Prospero and the Magic Rabbit.
Yes.
My first draft was a lot more dialogue heavy. I spent time building the prose around it. I feel that now it is quite prose heavy. Emily the Master Enchantress, your first book, very dialogue heavy.
Yes.
Not very much prose.
Yes.
So we've kind of got the balance, like the imbalance that we both have there with our first books. Over the years, we have learned, we have written more, we have more books out. We've improved our craft, which is the point of writing a lot. The more you do it, the better you get. What do you feel is how to balance it right? The prose to dialogue. What benefits does it bring when you get the balance right?
I think that to a degree, it's almost down to the taste of
Do you feel?
the reader.
Fair enough, yeah.
Therefore, the writer.
Therefore, there is no right or wrong answer.
I don't feel like there is a right or wrong answer, and certainly not in the sense that we can't necessarily describe an actual ratio.
Yeah, it's true. I couldn't
17
say.
to 13.
Yeah, you can't do that because you're right. Because some people particularly like very dense prose, lots of description, lots of, interiority, and other people would rather have the chatting and the conversations bringing a lot of this information out.
Yeah, I think you've accurately described one of the potential problems with not enough prose, which is that, you don't want your reader to not be able to understand who's talking, because there's just been so many, John said, JJ said, John said, JJ said. You don't want to do that every time because the reader's like, hey, I know who said.
Yeah.
But also you don't want to just have what they said.
I've done that thing when I've read books where I've gone to gone back to the last person who was labelled as speaking, and I've done down the page to work out who said this line. I was the pertinent information, who gave it. If you're literally having to do maths down the page to work out who spoke, in
the writing,
that is a big failure because you want to know who said these things because it shapes the character. The way they speak, what they know, is plot relevant.
Yeah, and sometimes it's dead easy to tell when you're reading a book, because if you have a very strong conflict-driven scene where one person is arguing for, kill the bad guy, and the other person is arguing for no, that would make us no better than the bad guy, then you kind of know who's who.
But you still,
but not every conversation is going to be that black and white.
Exactly, and also the moment you lose track of who's spoken, you're booted out of the story. When I'm there trying to, count down the page, to bump between different lines of speech to work out who said the one that I'm interested in, I am not in the conversation. I am not in the story. I'm outside trying to fight my way back in to figure out what's going on.
You're essentially making notes to try and figure it out, and that's not fun.
And also, as well, even if you clearly label who said what, reading a script is a different experience to reading a book.
Yes.
One of the conversations I had with one of the actors was that reading the script for Hollowhood wasn't relaxing. Yeah. Because it was work. Because I said, are you enjoying, I said, are you enjoying the script? Are you enjoying it? And he was sort of like, well, in the sense it's a good story, but I don't enjoy reading it because it's not a story, it's a script, it's work.
It's a starting point.
Exactly. It requires, the script requires your visual imagination, your trying to put the interiority and the environment in your head. It is effort. Script reading isn't relaxed. I mean, unless you particularly, like, some people probably like reading scripts for a hobby, but generally there's a reason scripts are working documents and books aren't.
Yeah.
Script reading is a task you do to bring it to life in the way your book does with the prose. If it's not alive with prose, it's not a relaxing read.
Yeah, essentially, with a script, not everybody's job has been done yet.
Yeah,
exactly. Whereas with a novel, it has. The author has done their job, and now it is in your hands.
Yeah. And
it's coming to life. Whereas, with a script, so with not enough prose, like the Emily the Master Enchantress, I don't know if it's fair to say there's not enough prose, but it's definitely teasing the line.
I would say it's more...
If it's not.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is... I think dialogue heavy is probably the right description, because there is prose, there is interiority. You haven't written a script. It's not a script.
It's not a script.
But it is a dialogue heavy book.
Yeah, when I started, I was very much inspired by dialogue sort of heavy writers of any format. So I was naturally like, that was one of the things I wanted to develop. So naturally...
So you focused on that. And the thing is, as I say, you still wrote an incredible book, but as with all first books, I think any writer's first book, they learn, their writing will improve.
Yeah. Well, essentially,
any dancer's first stage show isn't going to be weaker than their, later.
And for me, I stuck to some pretty straightforward rules that will keep a new writer fairly strong, strong enough, which was if Emily, the main character, was in the scene, I was in her point of view and only her point of view, so that sometimes I would reveal to the reader what she felt or thought about what somebody else was saying, but I would never reveal what somebody else was feeling or thinking. I would reveal how Emily interpreted other people's behaviours to try and get to how she felt they were thinking and feeling. If you get me.
But that is important. The interiority, the interiority of your characters, how they interpret things, how they respond, their emotional response to things, is so much of what brings you into who they are as a person. If you're not doing God perspective,
right?
If you are doing first person, so you only are knowing one character's POV at a time, it helps you get to know and understand that character. So you want the prose for that. You also want the prose to, otherwise you've got they're in a box.
They're in a box.
If they walk into a room and you have no prose.
Right.
Because you don't walk into a room and say, oh look, I'm in this room that is cold and grey. You walk into the room and have the conversation you're having.
Whilst feeling cold.
Exactly.
And perhaps a little bit bored by the colour scheme.
Exactly. But, so you don't want to just have your characters interacting in various boxes, because you can't be with them in that experience. But then, as I say, you have the other problem, which is where I started off going. I feel my first book, where you don't have as much dialogue as perhaps you should. And as I say, neither of our first books are good books. I'm going to just big us up there and say our first books are good books. But we have reached a balance that's better, because I feel that a lot of the prose is things that if your characters say it and they interact with each other, instead of just thinking it or describing it to the audience, if the characters are interacting and discussing it, you get to understand their relationship. You get to see how they react with other people. You learn a lot about characters by the way they speak to each other, how they respond to each other, the things they don't say to each other.
Sure.
So if you don't show them speaking, you don't know that aspect of their relationship. What will they or not speak? Will they or won't they say to each other? Mm-hmm. What do they focus on? How do they respond? Are they teasing? Are they flirty? if you don't have them interact very often, you lose that dimension of character relationships. So you don't get to know the characters as well. So either way, too much dialogue, you don't get to know the characters too well because they are interacting with each other in a white box and you don't know what they're thinking.
Right.
And too much prose over dialogue, you don't get to know the characters as well because you don't know how they communicate. You don't know what their relationship is like with each other. So you do have to find a balance that allows your audience connect with those characters, understand those characters, without bumping them out by being an extreme on either way.
Right. I think with this conversation, with this piece of advice or this theme, I strongly feel like you kind of have to, in the end, go with your gut and trust your own eye. Because if you enjoy it, you count. Like,
yeah, 100%.
If you're, the problem with your eye, obviously, is that you created all of this. Yeah. So you don't know what it's like to read it without knowing it all.
And the thing is, if you're reading, if I read the script for Hollowhead, for instance, if we use the dialogue heavy as an example, the script for Hollowhead, when I read it, I know what those characters are thinking. I know what the room they're in looks like. I know what the environment is. I mean, not just because I've been on set, because when we wrote it, anytime I was responsible for writing one of the scenes, I was immersed in it. So I could feel it because I'm a very visual writer. I see all the things that I'm writing like it's a film in my head. So creating a film is kind of the natural stepping from that. But just because I can see it and I can feel it and I understand it doesn't mean my reader does. So when I read it, I forget that it's a working document that isn't a relaxing read.
Right. You're seeing the story.
I'm seeing it as if it was written with prose because I created it. So I know the environment. I know all of that stuff.
So yeah.
A reader who doesn't won't have that same experience.
Yeah, if you want to gauge whether the novel that you're writing is difficult to experience in a felt way, that's when you probably will need somebody else to read it and try not to lead them to an answer one way or another, because if you can,
good proofreaders are for.
Yeah, they will tell you if they felt distant or if they felt like it was too slow because there was so much prose. The distance is likely to come if there's not enough.
Yeah, it is finding a balance that doesn't slow your story down, doesn't boot you away from the characters' interactions, doesn't overload you with prose, but doesn't leave you without description. It's a science, and everybody, as you say, has different tastes. And some people prefer dialogue heavy, and some people prefer prose heavy, and it is fine either way.
For example, if I'm reading. And this is more specific to actually reading a book than listening to an audiobook. If I'm reading a book, dialogue, I am leaning forward, I'm interested. Because there's something about written dialogue or performed dialogue on television or on film that I find to be something that I can comprehend very easily. So you
will lean more towards dialogue-heavy stories for that reason.
Because I find it easier to communicate things I actually believe or think or ideas I don't necessarily believe, but I am contemplating through characters who do believe those things, talking about them. Because that's how I would communicate the mess in my head, through characters who are competent at communicating those different ideas or whatever they are, even if it's just I want to go and save the world from an evil monster or whatever. Because that's sort of one of the ways that I find it easy to communicate what's inside my chaotic head.
You're drawn to reading the things that are done in the same way.
Because I feel like I'm getting into the writer's head when there is dialogue more than I do when there is prose. When there's prose,
that's interesting. Yeah,
I can enjoy prose, and I enjoy J.K. Rowling's prose very much. When she's writing what Harry did for a month before school started, not the Vernon and whatever, but just the magical stuff. Hagrid was doing this or whatever. I find it really interesting, but not everybody gets that response from me, and that's probably because she's very competent, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, naturally I kind of project my own sort of weird head onto everybody else's shoulders and give everybody else through my writing what I think they might want, which isn't necessarily true. So in the latest Showmaid's novel, which is still a in progress endeavour, I have been more confident and relaxed about communicating to the reader through simple paragraphs about what the main character is feeling or doing and how it pertains to the story that character's involved in. Without
confidence is that's what you get through experience, but
yes, it is, and also through reading and knowing that it's and experiencing being on the other side of it, where you're like, no, I forgive this wholeheartedly when I'm reading. I don't need, do you know what I mean, to be told a story in this specific way that I kind of feel like I have to tell a story. Reading is actually fun, and that's the most freeing thing about this, is that the thing that you're creating is going to be fun for someone to read.
It is entertaining.
It is not going to be homework that they're forced to do, and you're desperate to entertain them, and that's right, because
of course you want to entertain your audience, but they aren't going into this taking notes and studying your ratio of dialogue to prose. Nobody's doing that.
They're doing it for a good time,
and so you want them to have a good time. You don't want to boot them out by making them count who said what.
No.
But you can assume that reading for pleasure is pleasurable. So thank you very much for watching our video about the ratio you should be trying to strike between prose and dialogue.
17 to 13.
That's not even a ratio.
Well, you put 17 and the little and then 13. That is exactly what a ratio is.
Okay. Ignore him. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give our video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and we can keep bringing you more writing advice. If you want some more on Hollowhood, the film that we were talking about before, I'll put a link here. We are filming in the minute, well, not right this moment, we're sitting on the sofa talking to you. So yeah, keep up with what we're doing, and we'll be back again soon. Bye.
Bye.